Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning to everyone, wherever you may be today, and welcome to today's Inside Local webinar. I am Miles Anderson, I am your host today, and today's topic is Advanced Keyword Strategies for Local Search. We have three wonderful, charming, and brilliant expert panelists with us today to debate this particular topic. I'll just give them a little introduction in case they're new to you. Firstly, we have Basu. Now, Dev is the president and CEO of a Toronto-based agency called Powered by Search. He's extremely experienced. He's been working in the digital marketing space for many years and in local since as far back as 2007. He's so skilled that in fact he's now professor of applied arts and marketing at Seneca College, so he's training the next generation of search marketeers, inbound marketeers, whatever they'll be calling themselves, into their kind of successful careers. So Dev, lovely to have you with us today. And then we have Casey Meraz. Casey runs a Denver-based agency called Ethical Consulting, or Ethical SEO. He's a prolific blogger on his own blogs as well as on Moz.com and also on BrightLocal. He's a contributor to the Local Search Ranking Factors study, and he has joined us on a couple of previous webinars, so great to have him back. And then we also have Guy Sakalakis. Now, Guy is the founder of AttorneySync, who are a specialist marketing service helping to cater to those in the kind of legal sector with their kind of online marketing. So he has a lot of experience in that sector, as does Casey as well. So we have a lot of insight and tips coming out of the legal sector today and across all other sectors. So hopefully a very broad and vast and deep set of experiences we'll be benefiting from. So guys, thank you all for being with us today. I know you're all very busy, so we do appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with us. Working behind the scenes, we have Linda Bouquet from the Local Search Forum. They are the kind of co-organizers and the co-promoters of Inside Local. So Linda, thank you again for your help. We also have Colin Nielsen from Impresio Marketing. They're also a kind of Toronto-based agency, as well as having other locations and clients all across North America. So Colin, thanks for helping us out today. And last, and most definitely least, there is myself. I am the CEO of BrightLocal. We have a lot of our customers and users listening in today, so many thanks to you all for sharing an hour of your time to kind of be with us today. I'll just share the agenda that we have today and leave it on screen for 20 seconds or so, so you can kind of scan your eyes down that. Okay, we also have a few kind of housekeeping things. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, just kind of run through these. There's a question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. That's where you can ask any questions. Linda and Colin, as well as the kind of panelists, will be kind of keeping an eye on that and kind of answering your questions and also helping to kind of recap on any points that were mentioned. There's also a chat box. Now, any links and resources the guys want to share will go into the chat box. So keep an eye on both the question box and the chat box. The webinar is being recorded, so don't feel that you have to kind of hurriedly note everything down. The slide deck itself is available on slideshare.net, and we will send a roundup email on Friday with both the link to the webinar recording and also a link to the slide deck. So hopefully you can just sit back, relax, enjoy the debate that we're going to have, and then anything you need to recap on, you'll get the email sent to you on Friday. If you want to kind of tweet anything that you kind of hear about or learn about today, that'll be great. And please use the hashtag InsideLocal. And we're going to be running 3 polls. And basically these are polls for you as kind of listeners and attendees to answer. We're going to be posing similar questions to you as we do to our 3 experts, just so that we can get a sense of how those out there in the kind of SEO world are seeing the kind of particular issues that we'll be debating. We typically get anywhere between kind of 400 and 600 people attending these webinars. So it's a great sample size and a great pool of kind of knowledge and people involved in SEO and in sort of search marketing. It's great to understand how you're seeing the issues that we're debating. So actually just going to kick off with our first poll and then jump into the first topic. So I'm going to kick off the first poll now. And the first question is, how important is keyword research for local search? There we go. I'm going to close the poll now and just share the results with you on screen. So hopefully you can all see that. So you can see that 40% of people said that keyword research is critical. Another 40% said very important. 10% said fairly important. So 88% of people said it's either critical or very important. Which is probably why we've had such great attendance and sign up for today's webinar, given that it's such a key topic. So without further ado, let's jump into the first part of the agenda. So Dev, I'm going to start with you with this first question. very broadly, how and why is keyword research so important for search success?
Well, without doing keyword research, you can't really know what the end users are looking for, and if you don't know what they're looking for, you can't know what to create in terms of content that would service their end users or user intent. You wouldn't know what kind of pages to create. You wouldn't know what kind of categories to select on your Google Local Plus profiles, for example. So without it, basically, it's sort of step one. Steps 2 to 10 are not possible without it. So it's a dependent task to do before you can get anything else done competently.
Okay, great. Casey, is kind of keyword research where you start? Is it the starting point for everything else that it is to follow?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think Dev covered that very well as far as why it's important and whatnot. But also, you have to do that research, and you have to know where those keywords are going to go on your site as well. And without doing that research or having that plan, you can cannibalize yourself too, which is something that's just important to throw in there real quickly because I see that a lot. But it's absolutely important in the first step of my process.
Okay, thank you guys. Guy, how long do you typically spend on kind of keyword planning as opposed to kind of other kind of pre-campaign tasks?
It's a big part of what we do to start with. So, in specific time, it kind of depends on the campaign, depends on the site, but, we do a big, and really this ties back into understanding the audience and profiling and building personas about the audience that you want to attract, but a big part of that happens at the beginning of our campaigns, and, it can be, we can spend weeks on that in the initial, and then, of course, it's an ongoing thing. It never really stops for us.
Back to you, Dev. Does it change for you if you're inheriting a business that's already optimized to some degree, as opposed to starting with something that is relatively fresh and green?
It does change because you need to then look at the historical focus of the business, the historical buyers and buyer personas of the business, and then understand, is it the same business today as it was a year or 2 years ago? Also, where is that business headed? What kind of customers does it want to attract in the future? So it's actually more work if you're inheriting an account that's already fairly optimized, because you actually have to go back in time to see what was done and what the effects of that were, so that you can do more of what's been working and less of what's not been working.
Question for you, Guy. You've got, I think you've got two agencies, right? You've got one that sort of focuses on legal marketing, and it's probably actually maybe very similar to kind of Casey, and then one that is kind of, looks at all types of kind of sort of business categories. Given how competitive the legal sort of sector is, does that really change your approach if it's in a very competitive sector to a less competitive sector?
So I think that I'll answer it this way. What we try to do is we try to bucket keywords and keyword themes by competition and by volume. So what we'll do is we'll say, so if we're in a competitive space or there's a group of competitive keywords, we'll say, look, these are long-term keyword targets that we want to hit. We want to start laying the foundation for those today, but we know that it's going to take some time. And so we want to have this conversation with clients as well to say, look, this is not going to happen overnight when you're trying to rank for an extremely competitive keyword. On the other hand, though, we don't want to wait and put all our eggs in the competitive long-term keyword buckets. We want to get quick wins too. And so we also have short-term keyword targets where the competition level might be much lower. And the volume might also reflect that as well. But if you can get some traffic and get some conversion, depending on what your objectives are for the site and the campaign, you can fill in the gaps in the short term. So it's about bucketing. For us at the beginning in terms of competitiveness, it's bucketing keywords themselves, themes, and personas based on short-term objectives and long-term objectives. And the competition level plays a big role in that.
You mentioned kind of personas a couple of times there. Can you just go into a little bit more detail about how personas, kind of what they are, maybe very briefly, but also how that might impact the search term that you end up using?
Sure. So, at a really simplistic level, it's understanding your audience. So it might be a combination of demographic and psychographic marketing type information about your target audience. And, it's really about it's attracting for lawyers, it's attracting the types of clients that they're looking for a business that's not legal, that has customers. It's about, profiling the types of customers you're trying to attract to your site. how they're using search, how they're using the web, what kind of questions they're going to be asking, and that layers right into the types of queries they use to answer questions, which relate to the problems they're having and how your business services or product solves those problems.
Great, gee, thank you. That's a lovely kind of clear description there. Casey, question for you. We talk about kind of keywords, but obviously now we've kind of moved on to kind of semantic search. We had the Hummingbird update, a long time ago now, in the kind of sort of, in the annals of search. How has that kind of shift in terms of how kind of Google looks at sites and interprets kind of search terms or search queries rather? How does that affect or change keyword research from what it might have been pre-Hummingbird?
Sure. So, well, first of all, I mean, ever since going back to Venice, of course, search is a lot more localized, and it's been continuing to get that way. So when you're thinking about keyword ideas, you and I were kind of joking about this a little bit yesterday. A lot of these clients are focusing on these head terms or these long-term goals, but it could just be the SEOs typing that in, or it could just be, in our case, with attorneys with big heads, typing that in, just trying to see, where am I ranking in comparison to that? So since then, it's changed a lot to not only be a lot more localized, but obviously searcher intent is changing too. Our minds are getting reprogrammed, where maybe we used to type in Los Angeles personal injury lawyer or something like that, but now we know we can type in these very long tail question type keywords, and we're seeing more and more of that. And I mean, that only makes sense too, because you're answering the user's question, you're serving their need, and like he was saying, if you know their audience, if you know where they're looking and these questions that they're going to be asking, you can do your keyword research around that and build your content around these big ideas. And I think we're going to see more of that direction, where search is more question based, I guess.
Okay, great. I guess a kind of final point maybe in this part of the kind of webinar. I'll come back to you, Dev. Does not doing keyword research really hamper your chances of delivering success for your clients?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that if you are a local search practitioner, you can possibly get, I would say 30% of the way just by being able to pick a service and a category and a geography, for example, and say, well, it would be Los Angeles personal injury lawyer, for example, and that's the main keyword you want to look for. But, well, two things will end up happening. One, which is what Guy alluded to, that's a really competitive keyword, so you're going to be spinning your wheels for a couple of months trying to get rankings on that. Second thing is you're going to plateau. So if you are someone that works with clients, or you happen to be a client yourself and work with an agency, you're going to get to a point where you're not going to see incremental results after you dominate that particular keyword or keyword variation, and then you're going to be like, whoa, what do I do next, right? And if you're the client, you're looking at a consultant, and if you're the consultant's going, oh crap, now I should have started this before and I didn't, right? That's the value of extending beyond just what you know.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, guys. We're going to move on to the next. Actually, the next poll, second poll first, and then we're going to move on to the kind of keyword planning process phase. So, all the attendees, please take part in this next poll. The question is, how many keywords do you target per location? And obviously, this is we've got some kind of quantity options on the screen now. If you could just spend 5 seconds giving us your answer, that would be great. Okay, great. I'm going to shut the poll down and share the results with you. So what we can see is that 40% are just targeting 0 to 10 kind of keywords. Under 50 keywords is around what is that, 68, 78? It's almost kind of 84%. So it looks like a lot of people are kind of just targeting a few select terms rather than kind of spreading the net sort of far and wide. So that's great data to share with us, guys. Thank you very much. Right, let's look at this is probably the bit that I imagine we'll spend the majority of our time on the webinar discussing. So it's about the kind of keyword planning process. And Casey, let's sort of start with you. Where do you start the keyword planning process? And what are the first few things that you do?
Sure. So I have a methodology, and it changes depending on what industry where I'm looking at. But for me, it's starting with an idea or a group of ideas and saying, okay, this is the need I need to fill based on the keyword map that I created. these are the topics I need to fill. So I start with a general topic or idea, and then I'm going to start plugging that into tools. So obviously, pretty much everybody here uses Google Keyword Planner for keyword research. And then what I found, though, is more just kind of really triggers more results and gets those creative juices flowing. So auto-suggest is obviously a big one in Google, not hitting enter, and then using the underscore for the wildcard, keywordtool.io. And really what I'm trying to do is just really understand that topic and the questions that people are asking around that topic and the most popular themes around that topic to really hone in and figure out where I need to choose from. So the first step for me is really just that brainstorming, research, getting as much data as possible, and then grouping those into ideas so that I can pick from there, based on a number of factors, competition and other factors.
Dev, what's your sort of your process in a nutshell for keyword planning?
So we look at three things and derive a score from them. So the first two are volume and competition. The third one is intent. And then all that boils down into basically grouping keywords into a primary focus and a secondary focus. We also go through two stages. One is primary research, and then one is secondary research. So the secondary research is from tools like keywordtool.io or Google Keyword Planner, for example, because that's essentially market research, right? The primary part has to do with the client filling out a strategy questionnaire, and we understand the different components of their business. We ask them questions like, what are the top 10 reasons why people buy from you? Why do they not buy from you, for example? We look at the competition as well as part of, I'm jumping back and forth here, but one of the things that we use for keyword research that might be a little interesting or different is we take the competitors who are ranking on the first page and the competitors the client believes are their biggest competitors, basically. We take the landing page, the home page, for example, or the page that ranks within the city, and in the Keyword Planner, all we do is put that URL in to understand what keywords Google associates with that domain. And so that basically goes into our keyword map. And then finally, the output from that is a preferred landing page strategy so that we can then divvy up certain sets of keywords, primary keywords with a focus on a particular page, or a location page per the number of locations that they have, or a service plus location, depending if they have many services at the same location. So that sort of is how we would do it in a nutshell.
You mentioned a keyword map. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so a keyword map basically is where you have seed keywords and you have qualifiers, for example, so top, best, top 10. Then you have qualifiers like city or modifiers, for example, beyond that, where you can get into neighborhoods or boroughs, for example. And the permutations and combinations of that are what yield a short tail, mid tail, or long tail output. So if you can imagine if you, in Excel, kind of concatenated all the values together, you'd get like Chicago as a city, personal injury, and then lawyer or attorney, for example, as a modifier, right? The three things put together give you Chicago personal injury lawyer, but it can also give you Chicago personal injury attorney. And then an expansion of that would be best Chicago personal injury attorney, for example. And you basically try taking each one of these things that kind of permutate or combinate together in separate cells in Excel, and then you can spit out a variation that makes sense. You run the variations that make sense through Keyword Planner and then derive intent around that as well, and then see whether you want to create separate landing pages for those or group a bunch of keywords that target the same page.
Great, that's a very kind of very clear description. Guy, do you have anything sort of outside of what the other two guys have said? You obviously talked about I think you said about kind of sort of your kind of primary kind of keywords and also the secondary keywords. Maybe you could talk us a little about your process.
Sure. So we do a lot of the same things that Casey and Dev mentioned. One thing that I would add that we think a lot about is where we can, we want to really listen to the existing customers or clients. So if we have the opportunity, we also have an intake we do with clients, but the other thing that's a part of that is, do you have existing clients, former clients, or customers, and can we just listen to them describe your business and describe how your services or products help them achieve whatever issue they're dealing with. So in a legal context, if we can get access to it, so if a client, or a former client or current client can agree to it, we want to just listen to how they describe what the attorney does, what kind of problems, how they go through the process. And so that's maybe that's a little pre-keyword process, but it flows right into it because you start to flesh out what the questions are that these folks might be using to perform searches. And so one of the biggest things to keep in mind for whether you're at an agency or you're a client yourself is that we tend to think that people use search engines the same way that we do, and they use the language the same, they describe things the same way that we might internally or at the agency. It's just not true, especially if you become legal, if you are been practicing lawyer for a long time, how you describe particular terms includes a lot of jargon, where the clients, they're not using any of that, but in order for them to perform their searches, they're looking for, the way that they describe the problem, the issue that the service is going to fill, that's a big piece for us. So we spend a lot of time trying to flesh that stuff out from clients where we can, and when we can't, we also use tools and to do market research. But I think a huge opportunity for folks is to, where they can, get customers and clients in a room, listen to them, get them on the phone, and just start having them describe the service that they're looking for. How would you describe this lawyer? How would you describe how this lawyer helped you? How would you describe what this product does for you? I think you can get a lot of great keyword ideas out of that.
Yeah, just to add to that real quickly, Guy, what Guy was saying there is, you work with a variety of clients, and some business owners or marketing managers, they actually know their clients and they know them pretty well. But just as often, they don't. They don't even know what their clients are looking for. They have this own mindset based on their own precepts of what they've experienced. And so diving into that information that he's talking about is crucial. And the same goes back to what Dev was saying, looking at the competition sites. You can learn from that, definitely. But when you're doing that, make sure that you're putting your brain behind it and really weeding out the stuff that's good in there versus the stuff that's bad. Because sometimes, people just get lucky and they rank with maybe a bad strategy, and there is bad information up there. So you really have to put your own, brain behind it.
I'll add one tip over here that might be useful. Most of us, including most agencies, do this the first time when a client intake happens, but usually keyword research is not revisited often enough. And so one of the things that I have my team do is basically do regular feedbacks from updates from the client every quarter. But also you can put in some automatic feedback processes. So an example of that would be when you're creating content on pages, if you use a site surveying solution like Google Consumer Surveys or Qualaroo, for example, just to ask, was this page helpful? And if it's a yes, then great. But if no, you let the user type in what they were looking for or how the page could be more helpful. If you analyze that on a quarterly basis and put it into a tag cloud, you can actually look at the natural language responses and see what terms are being repeated the most, and that gives you primary keyword research from actual users who hit the page. The other thing that you can do if you work with a professional services business where it's not an e-commerce transaction but you're getting a lead, is if you have call tracking, for example, either you can get the calls transcribed through an external service, Mechanical Turk, for example, or you can just use a call tracking solution that transcribes it for you, and you can do the exact same tag cloud analysis over there if you don't have somebody listening to every single call. So it's very telling when somebody calls in as a lead what they think they searched versus what they actually searched. And there's some hidden opportunities over there.
That's great. So there's a lot of kind of using external kind of pointers towards possible keywords and competitors, but also the most valuable stuff is being kind of creative and looking internally at existing customers, which makes so much kind of logical sense. Also, you talked there about kind of using kind of discussions and talking to customers. How about using other things like on-site search, for example? If a business has an on-site sort of search function, or also kind of looking at GA or looking at kind of webmaster tools. Casey, how do you make use of the data that those types of sources can help you with?
Sure. So what Miles was talking about first was the internal site search. So if your internal website has a search function and potential website visitors are typing questions into there, you can look at that data and see, hey, is there some needs here that I'm not filling, or take advantage of that. But one of the other things, we use that data, but one of the things that people, for some reason, don't consider or talk about too much is offline data. Again, if you are running any type of business and you have somebody answering the phone, what are the questions that you're getting most often? Are they repeating? Or even if they're just onesie-twosie type questions, talking to your staff offline through an interview process, which is something that we've adopted in a lot of situations, really gets a lot of those nuggets of information out. And specifically, just kind of circling it back to attorneys, legal secretaries are answering the phones or doing a lot of those conversations for their clients or for their attorneys there. So talking to them and making a rolling list of these. We actually have Google Docs, for example. You can set up just a quick question box, and you have that in their browser. So when these questions come up, you build it into their processes so that they record it and record it and record it, and then you can look for themes. But without that data, if you're not recording that data and you're not recording it constantly, then it may not be of so much use. But anywhere that you can get these data, or anywhere you can get this data where these people are asking these questions, do it, and do not be afraid of the offline part of it. SEOs need to be more engaged in customers' businesses where appropriate to actually get that info, but that's what really sets you apart from everybody else, and that's what's really going to funnel these ideas of your keywords here and enhancing that group.
So imagine you're sort of halfway through the process and you've done a lot of the initial research and you've got a list now of potentially hundreds if not thousands of keywords. Question for Yugi, how do you bring that back down to a really manageable list? And we saw a second ago that most people say they target less than sort of 50 terms. How do you take all that really juicy stuff, all that research you've done, and filter that down to the things that you really have the ability to focus on and to deliver on?
Okay, so assuming that we don't have, just say we're starting brand new, we don't have historical, well, let me start there. If you have historical keywords with conversions, you probably want to prioritize those if your goal is to drive conversions. So one thing that we haven't really talked about as much, but if you've got a great place to get keyword information, especially as it ties to conversions, is from paid search media. So if you're running AdWords and you know that X, Y, and Z queries are converting at a certain rate and they're ROI positive and all that kind of stuff, then you start with those. One of the oftentimes what you see is a lot of those keywords tend to be more competitive, so they go in that long-term bucket for us. We want to work towards those, but we're not just putting, we're not putting all of our focus into that. So, for us, it's about short-term, intermediate, long-term keyword goals based on competition, based on volume. I thought Deb made a great point about intent, and that ties into conversion as well. So there might be some keywords that might be great short-term opportunities, but they're not really tied to that intent that's for the campaign goal of conversion. And so you might say, well, that's going to fall a little further down. But at the end of the day, if you can generate millions of keywords, but you have to start to prioritize them. And for us, not to sound like a broken record, but the big things we start to prioritize based on are volume and competition, and then if we can, we want to understand how they relate to conversion, which I think is another way of talking about intent. But there isn't a magic number of keywords to go after. It totally depends on the landscape, competitors, what works for your business, types of language. But I think one of the things that comes out of when you're talking about what comes out of your planning process, you want to look for opportunities where you've got that great match of volume, lower competition, and tied high to conversion or some kind of intent. And when you can find those, make those a priority on your site. Make those a priority in terms of campaign content you're developing. Because if you can achieve positions for those, they're going to be much quicker wins and in terms of actually getting a conversion, as opposed to just saying, hey, we got a ranking, but there's no traffic for it. Or we know a keyword long-term, it's awesome, but it's going to take us a year to get there, and so we're going to do nothing until we're going to crawl our eggs into that long-term keyword bucket. So it's really about prioritizing for us based on volume, competition and conversion.
That's great. Thanks, Guy. Dev, Guy mentioned a couple of times there, like the intent of the searcher when they're using sort of search terms. Can you talk to us a little bit about intent and why it's so important to understand and pay attention to the intention of a search term that's used?
Sure. So, I mean, when people are looking for things online or services online, for example, they're usually somewhere along the buying funnel, basically, whether they're at the researching stage or they're right about to choose vendors or to choose a professional, for example, and then become a lead, essentially. So it's important to understand the intent and create content that's tied or aligned to that intent, because then you can really ensure a high conversion rate. So an example would be if somebody is right at the start of the process and they're looking to engage, for example, a divorce attorney, for example. Well, they probably want to know what their options are. They want to know what related to their situation, for example. They're looking for information. They're not looking for a professional yet, basically. So when creating that type of content, or if you want to even create that type of content, probably doesn't make sense to create a page or a call to action that advises them to contact an attorney yet, because they're simply not ready. It does make sense for offering them some sort of nurturing content, like downloading a checklist, for example, of things that they need to know or prepare, for example, before they come to an attorney, right? Versus if it's a buying keyword where there's good local intent, they've described a local keyword, or they've described qualifiers like best, for example, top, etc. Those types of keywords are more buying oriented, so the type of content that you want to create over there has to be credibility enhancing, has to have testimonials, for example, has to have social proof, and then finally would have to have some sort of capture, lead capture form or a phone number for a contact in terms of converting that buying intent into an actual lead. So understanding user intent is supreme, because if you don't understand the user intent, you're going to start creating content that's not aligned to what somebody's looking for, which will show up in your analytics reports as bounce rates. Or, worse off, they just simply won't even click your listing in Google or even come to the site. They'll just go to somebody else's website that has got title tags and even descriptions and a URL that's better aligned with the intent of what they were looking for.
Wonderful, Dev. Thank you. I feel enlightened, which is great. Casey, got a question for you. Now, you work as kind of Guy does a lot in the kind of legal sector. Given that you've got a particular kind of niche that you kind of focus on, what benefits does that bring you in terms of your kind of keyword research? And then also, are there any kind of pitfalls in having a specific focus in one industry?
Yeah, well, so the benefit is long term. We just get better at it and we refine our processes. But for us, our approach is unique too, and it kind of goes back to what Dev was talking a little bit here, where we're really trying to, as far as the legal space goes, find keywords that are answering people's questions, really making resource websites, so keywords around resources, not San Diego personal injury attorney, but rather these questions that people are asking. Will I go bankrupt during a divorce, or things like that? By the way, don't do remarketing for divorce clients because their spouse might use their computer. But also, really, it's easy to get stuck, I guess, in a little bit of a rut sometimes. But you just got to take that out. And every time we talk to a new client and do these steps and have these conversations, where we're asking them about this offline data, what their clients are asking and what their goals are actually trying to achieve. We develop procedures and refine those that get better to help them become experts. So that's very important. So we get a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether someone else has got their mic on, but other speakers, it's just a little bit of sort of feedback coming back from Casey there. Dev, question for you actually. I know you've got, given that you've got some single business clients and some multi-location clients, how does that affect the keyword process for you? And if you're working with clients with lots of locations, how do you do that at an efficient scale?
So it's a great question, I think. In terms of how it affects the multi-location clients, we do tend to work with clients that have anywhere between 50 locations to 4,000 locations, for example. So it gets a bit more wonky when you're at the 1,000+ scale in terms of locations. What you're trying to do over there at that point of time is really, you're looking at the template that is establishing the sort of the store page, if you will, or the location detail page. Then you also have to understand how to actually get those pages indexed and properly interlinked to each other. That's from a site structure perspective. From a keyword research perspective, you're trying to look for the commonalities between locations that you can apply sort of across the board and at scale, basically. Often this means that we're doing Qualaroo, for example, or Google site consumer surveys, for example, on the site. Typically, our multi-location clients have quite a bit of traffic, so we can actually get a decent sort of 4 to 5% response rate on that traffic to tell us what would actually make their pages better. So we work with one large shipping and logistics client in the States, and we ran such a study where we wanted to know exactly what were their consumers looking for in their local stores, for example. And we got back some great answers. They were looking for hours, they were looking for services, for example, they were looking for local business testimonials, and passing those recommendations on made those pages that much stronger and more enriched from a local search perspective. The keyword research for multi-location clients is often a factor of you want to look for those head and mid-tail type terms, but then one key thing that there's a difference is you also want to look for what the locals call their specific areas. And that's something that doesn't often come up in a keyword planner, for example. So it's always useful if you can talk to, especially if they have a call center, that's where you get really great nuggets of wisdom. What do people in your area call the area? Do they have special names for it, a colloquial name, for example? And if we can use those, then one of the things that we can do if we're using a content management system is start spitting out variations of those keywords that the locals call their own sort of geographies and areas, and put out landing pages with a specific keyword or targeted basically to that particular page. So like for example, in Chicago, I think you have the Golden Mile. Is that right, Guy? Golden Loop or Golden Mile? I can't remember. I'm Canadian, guys. I've been to Chicago a couple of times. Oh yeah, it's sort of, yeah. There you go. So you might want to create a page related to that, and if you didn't know that about Chicago, of course, when you're doing keyword research, that would be a missed opportunity. So there's a lot of similarities between single and multi-location research, but at multi-location keyword research, you're trying to look for a lot more scale. We also use a lot of APIs to help us with this, to get it done quickly, because there are points at which Keyword Planner, for example, will just top out and you can't get enough good research back.
Okay, that's great. Question for Guy. You're doing a mix of kind of organic and PPC work for clients. Do you utilize the same list, or how might you vary the keywords that you use depending on whether it's organic or PPC you're going to be using it for?
Yeah, I think one of the, so especially since not provided, I don't think that people put enough emphasis on paying for search query data. I know that it gets tricky, especially if you're you're a shop that focuses primarily on organic and you don't really have budget set aside for paid media management, or another agency handles paid media management, and sometimes it's siloed and you don't get access to that stuff. But I think that the learning from what's going on paid can be extremely useful, especially when you have conversion tracking set up, because again, that's a very easy way to say keyword conversion rate and making those keywords a priority. Another thing too that I tend to think, and I know we're going to dive into this, and I've noticed in the questions, people are really excited. I tend to think that there's too much of an emphasis put on tools. One of the challenges that I know a lot of folks face are that the tools are very limited. So, you get either the volumes for the tool, for the keywords aren't big enough to actually populate the tool. You see that a lot with Keyword Planner. I think it's good tools are good for brainstorming. Certainly, you want to get a sense of what some of the system volumes are, especially talking about auto-suggest and related searches and keyword I/O. But I don't think people put enough emphasis on kind of the research marketing aspect to things, where you actually get real people talking. So I thought the idea of transcribing phone calls with customers where you can, legally it's a little tricky because you got confidentiality issues, but when you can record and transcribe and analyze customer and even pre-sales conversations for questions and keywords, I think that's a place that people should spend more time on and less time trying to rely on a tool that's going to spit out some magic keyword that's going to be great. In fact, if there's any real gold secrets to me in keywords, it's identifying keywords that tend to actually be lower volume but are high conversion, or not even particular queries themselves, but groups of queries that are thematically related that Google will serve similar results for. So, people tend to say, okay, well, I need a query that has X number of searches per month that I can target, but instead what you might think about is a group. So, people in the PPC world know things like ad groups, where you've got a variation of a query that's, 10 different synonyms. So, take the Los Angeles personal injury lawyer, you might have Los Angeles personal injury lawyer, Los Angeles personal injury attorneys, law firm, maybe different orders of those terms. So thinking about keywords in terms of these themes and clusters is much more effective, in my opinion, than trying to go after this keyword has a volume of 2,000 keywords a month, so I'm going to get, in the first spot, I'm going to get 18% of those clicks, and I know historically my conversion rate for those is 10%. This is how many conversions I'm going to get, as opposed to taking learn from the paid search, but really spend more time with customers and clients and how the language they're using to describe their products and services.
Okay, that's great, Guy. Question for you, Casey. Given that a lot of people listening in are probably, consultants or kind of working small agencies, they may have a lot of clients. Time can be pretty tight. So, a lot of it is about, how can you efficiently use that time? How can you get great ROI on the effort put in? Presumably there are, I guess, or maybe there aren't diminishing returns, but when is enough in terms of the data you've got to really kind of move on to the next level? How do you know when you've reached that point where, the next minute of keyword research is actually not really going to yield you that much benefit?
Sure. So it really depends a lot on your process, actually, to answer that question, because let's say, for example, that you've done your initial brainstorming research and you figured out these themes that Guy is talking about. As soon as you know what themes you need to fill that for, that's really what you need to do, is you just need to find the keywords that are going to fit there and then figure out on your keyword map exactly where those are going to go on your website. So enough is enough, really just depending on your process. If you have a goal of I'm going to create this much content too over this amount of time, as soon as you know what that number is as well, you can kind of reverse engineer that, because it doesn't make sense to come up with 10,000 keyword ideas this year for me if I'm only going to create 30 pieces of content for my firm. So it's really knowing, that cost benefit of how much time you have, what the budget is, and what your goals are, specifically with your specific marketing strategy.
Okay, that's great. Dev, you talked a little bit about making sure that it's an ongoing process and you're always kind of feeding back in. How do you ensure as part of your process that happens? And how regularly will you look at a client's kind of keywords and then review it and possibly change them?
So the how we do it is using project management tools. So we use something called Teamwork, which is kind of like Basecamp. And we've got reminders and milestones set up for our account directors to let our SEO team know that they need to do this, and we do it roughly about every 6 months or so, or any time the client advises that there's something major that's changed in their business. So they maybe have added a division, they've acquired a different company, they've divested, something of that nature can trigger a need for revisiting keyword research.
Okay, that's great, guys. We've spent a good amount of time on this and given some real depth, which is great. Just going to go on to the next section, which is kind of, we have touched on this, but I thought we'd maybe just kind of group our thoughts around it. So this one is kind of favorite sources of data and tools. So really going to understand here is, and hopefully people, we know that our attendees, they love lists. They'd like to kind of go away at a list of great sources of kind of valuable data and also any kind of tools they've got. So maybe each of you could just think for a minute and then maybe sort of suggest the 3 or 4 tools you like and the best source of data. So Casey, I want to start with you, put you on the spot first. What are the key things that you think people should have in terms of their armory?
Well, see that there's too many tools. No, I mean, and that's the other thing too is you don't want to get you don't want to be over tooled, I guess. But for me, what I'm using primarily is realistically, it's not a tool, but the offline, like I was talking about. I do use Google Keyword Planner almost every day, and then really, since I'm big into these question queries, if you can't tell already, you know, the auto suggestions, not hitting enter on Google, and then definitely doing the you know, the card searches with the underscore, and then looking at suggested search terms or related search terms. That's what I honestly use the most. I do use these other tools that I've been mentioning, but also, like in the lawyer landscape, you got to realize there might be niche tools that are better for you. I wrote a guide the other day where I was talking about using Avo Answers or, you know, FindLaw forums where people are actually asking these questions and getting those ideas there. So if you're in a specific niche, you want to seek out those opportunities more because they're going to be better than tools that are made for a more generic set of data.
That's a great idea. So looking for kind of focused forums or sort of focus groups around a particular niches or niches, as we say in the UK, is a great idea. So brilliant. Guy, how about you? What are your sort of favorite tools of the trade or sources of inspiration?
So where you can get it, Google Analytics can still give you some keyword data. Webmaster Tools is definitely something we use, especially for impression volume. I think that's very useful. Page search query data is very valuable, but you know, as a more general theme too, I think that the understanding how tools work and what they're actually doing is important. Sure, everybody loves tools. There's lots of different tools, and they seem to, in a lot of cases, you think, oh, this is making my job easier, but in a lot of cases it's actually leading you in the wrong direction. And so I would hint to, and Casey made some really great points there, go to the sources of language, keywords that people are actually using. So forums, great source to find keywords. Those, you know, where there are real forums, that's language people are using, right? Offline data, great point. Language people are using. The transcribing calls, awesome. Webmaster Tools, that's real, you know, it's Google system data coming in terms of impressions. I think that's something to look at. Analytics where you can get it, and paid search. Those are, anytime you can get it where a user is actually, it's a keyword or a query or a group of queries that real users are using it versus some kind of automated tool that's trying to come up with permutations. And it's important to think about because you can get overwhelmed by automated permutations, but what's the language that people are actually using that has meaning for your business? I think that's a key thing to remember.
Okay, great. Thank you, Guy. I thought we lost you for a minute there, Dev, but your turn now. Anything you kind of want to add in terms of kind of tools or devices that you use?
Yeah, okay, so if you are selling a product, but you're doing so on a local basis, look at Amazon reviews for that product. Reviews in Amazon will typically give you lots of great keywords to look at why somebody was incentivized to buy, including what not to include on your landing page for people who give you, you know, or give not you, but necessarily that product, 1- or 2-star reviews. If you're looking to get some high-level data, tools like SEMrush are pretty good to give you that type of data. Definitely look at paid search query reports. Also, another thing that might be useful is look at, if you're doing any display, look at which placements on display are resulting in conversions, and then look at the types of sites that they basically fall into. Then you can start extracting content on those sites and run them through something like URL Profiler, for example, to see what content on those sites fared well socially, like on Facebook or Twitter, for example. And then that gives you kind of a hack almost on what kind of content you should be creating on your client's website because it's already been proven, right, to perform. Can you not hear me?
Nope. I lost the last sort of 10 seconds or so.
I think I was just saying that keywordplanner.io and using wildcards is pretty important as well, especially if you start segmenting them in Excel. If you have multi-phrase terms, segment them out because that could be your negative keyword list if you're doing any local paid search, basically.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. We've got about 10 minutes left, so Just going to do our third poll now, which is which two of the factors, you can select two in this case, are most important for you when choosing keywords. So I'm just going to put that on the screen. Okay, I'm going to close this poll now, and I'll share the answers with you. So looking at relevance, it comes out on top, which is great. Oh, hang on, can everyone see results? And then you've got so search term volume, then you've got kind of keyword intent, and then the level of competition. Dev, have you still got your audio? How would you agree with those in your personal experience? Would you have voted similarly?
Yeah, I think I would have probably placed intent higher up because I see that's where Google is probably going. Relevance and intent are very closely tied together, so I would have probably placed keyword intent even above search volume, and search volume would have been third, and then level of competition, I agree with that being the lowest ranking factor. It kind of goes along the way of what he was saying, which, if you find a set of keywords that have low volume but ultra high conversion rates, then sometimes, especially if you're a local business, quality of lead really matters more than absolute volume of leads. And in that case, you would probably want to optimize for relevance, keyword intent, search volume, and then competition.
Okay, great. Okay, let me just hide those results. We'll be publishing those on the kind of write-up for the webinar, guys. So anyone attending, if you missed the results of that and want to kind of follow up with them, you'll catch them on the blog. So we've talked a little bit about intent and conversion, so just going to jump over that onto the kind of last section, which is talking about the kind of influence of kind of hyperlocation on kind of keyword strategy. So Casey, a question for you. Since the kind of pigeon update, and that's therefore kind of narrowing down, particularly kind of local search, the radius of which businesses are returned for for sort of search terms. Has that had any influence on your approach on keywords that you use?
For us, it really hasn't, because a while ago we changed. Just talking about how your website is. It used to be that maybe we worked with clients that wanted to rank in 1,000 geographic areas, or whatever that number is, with their one website and their site structure, and they're creating all these head keywords with just adding, city geomodifiers to them. Now, obviously that's not good. But what we do is we try to send the signals, every signal that we can from that website, showing that they are in this geographic area and they serve that geographic area. So that kind of is a more wider net strategy that we cast, everything from content creation, but it's not really making that big of an impact as far as how we changed our process for keyword research, because search is so localized. So instead of just trying to have all these localized geo terms, we just have to try the rest. We try to make the rest of the signals really signify that, yes, I'm an authority in this city, and my website is proving that through these other methods.
Dev, for you, is it given the fact that people are being more truthful, I guess, about the kind of locations that they kind of truly serve and focus on, has that limited the number of, say, geo-modified search terms that you'll look to try and optimize any single location for?
So we still try, for example, for a single location to even restrict it down to 5 key buckets of keywords or less than that even. And if at the point at which we feel like there's keyword dilution for a keyword being mapped to a specific landing page, we'll either spin out a different landing page with unique content on it or limit the number of keywords that are going to be modified. I'll give you an example of how this might work at scale. So, and this is not related to the map results. It's more so for organic search results in local search that are influenced by Venice. If you, let's say, have a local focus, like you're a real estate company, for example, you could optimize for a particular property on a city level, a neighborhood level, a street level, or property type level. So it could be condos or houses in Toronto, Ontario, or it could be a neighborhood within Toronto, for example, that's being optimized. So if you start creating separate landing pages for all of those and included information about those areas, similar to what Airbnb, for example, does with its local areas where they take pictures, for example, of the local neighborhoods and whatnot, adding that type of local context can still make you win on multiple different keyword variations as long as it's contextually tied together. So for example, a province or a state would tie to cities, would internally link to cities, cities would link to neighborhoods, neighborhoods would link to streets, and those, every section basically has a top-down linking structure and a bottom-up linking structure as well. and that seems to work well in organic search, but it doesn't have any effect really on map results that I've noticed, at least.
Okay, Guy, do you take any benefits from keyword research into how you tackle kind of Google Plus local optimization at all, or is it all just influencing the content on the site and link building?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as much for Google Plus local in terms of categorization or anything like that. Definitely for content development, and so I guess you could say if you want to tie those together, you might content that you're publishing on Google Plus or on other social platforms, I think you want to think about keywords there as well. But for HyperLocal, it's been unbelievable to me. There's huge opportunity in really diving into local communities because the topics that people talk about, that you wouldn't even guess the types of language. It's impossible. Like keyword tools aren't going to tell you. You're not going to see it coming up in analytics. It's not going to be high volume in webmaster tools. But neighborhoods, street addresses, intersections, popular local businesses. And again, it comes back to really understanding, for hyperlocal businesses, you've got to understand that hyperlocal community and those hyperlocal users because I'm always constantly amazed how different people describe something based on very local communities. And so that's really on a hyperlocal level. You can get into these extremely uncompetitive keyword groups or intents or user personas that you can, short term, you can gain positions in traffic quickly. And because they're so hyperlocal, there's a high relevancy there and people are really engaged with the content. So, I used this example last time, but one of the things that we see are things like dangerous intersections where people care about it. It's like a safety issue. People have different opinions about it, but it's all extremely localized. Streets, intersections, neighborhoods, counties, and there's a whole bunch of other types of ways that people describe things at a local level that none of the tools are going to flesh out for you. So again, I think that especially, when you're talking about hyperlocal, you're talking about Google Plus, you're talking about social, dive into the conversations that people are having there and use those hyperlocal keywords.
Okay, that's great. Guys, it's 1 hour. It's 8 o'clock here in the UK. It's probably kind of 3 o'clock on the East Coast there. So we've reached the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for everyone who stayed with us for the full hour. Obviously, a big thank you to our three incredible panelists who I have learned a ton from today. Thank you very much for kind of sharing your experiences with you. Sorry we had a little bit of audio issues there, but hopefully it hasn't affected people's experience too much. Also, thank you to Linda and Conan. I've been scouring my eye down the questions. It looks like some of our panelists have been answering a few questions as well. So thank you to you guys for kind of taking the time to doing that and to kind of supporting the listeners. We do appreciate your efforts as always. We've got some new webinars have been kind of planned in now. So we've got one on the 11th of March, which is looking at alternative citation strategies. 18th of March is effective optimization for multi-location businesses, and then 22nd of April is about social strategies. In fact, we've got 7 new webinars planned in, taking us up until the end of July. So please do put your names down for those now and join us. We've got some new speakers that we haven't had before, which is great, which we can give these guys a little bit of a rest. I can stop harassing them and requesting they come on to InsideLocal. So please do kind of sign up. The next one, like I said, is the alternative citation strategies debated on the 11th of March. We've got Darren Shaw, Matthew Hunt, who works as Dev, and Damien Rollison from UBL. So please do sign up for that. And that's all we have time for. So again, to all our panelists, thank you so much, guys, for sparing an hour and a half of your time, as well as your expertise and your insights. I've learned a lot. I hope that all of our attendees have learned a lot as well. So thank you very much. And lastly, thank you everyone for listening in today. Have a great rest of your day, however long you have left of it, and hopefully we'll see you very soon on InsideLocal again. Okay, all the best. Goodbye now.